Chapter 12. What was I thinking? Hans thought in the moment after the question popped out of his mouth. Proposing to Anna after one evening was what Lars would call impetuous, and his father would most likely call idiotic. True, he only had 24 hours to win Anna over, but had he moved too fast? Hans shook his head. He was going with his gut, and his gut had told him that this was a good idea. Or was that just all the chocolate fondue gurgling around? It was hard to tell. Looking down at Anna, Hans waited anxiously. It'd only be a second since he'd asked, but as he waited for her answer, it felt like an eternity. He could see Anna's brain working, and he imagined she was weighing the pros and cons. She wasn't stupid. That had become clear over the course of the evening. But she was romantic, and she was spontaneous. That might be all he needed to ensure he never had to go back to the Southern Isles or his father or anything else he had fled. Now, if only she would give him an answer. Just then, Anna opened her mouth. Hans sucked in his breath, ready, but she closed it again. Hans's eyes bulged. Anna took her own deep breath. Can I say something even crazier? She asked. Hans crossed his fingers behind his back and nodded. Yes, she cried, throwing her arms around Hans and squeezing him with all the might she could muster. Hans let out a sigh of relief as a warm feeling flooded his chest. Now, he told himself, remember why you're here. This is a business transaction, nothing more. Oh, Anna, Hans said, squeezing her hand, you couldn't have made me happier. This is everything I always wanted and never even knew. Which is true, he added to himself. I did want to marry a princess. I just never thought it would be Anna. Funny how the things work out. Anna laughed and began jumping up and down. There is so much we have to do. Of course, we must get married soon. I'll need to talk to the seamstress about my dress. White, of course. Maybe with some lace on the sleeves and a long train. I've always wanted a... Oops! Unfortunately, the ground Anna had been jumping on was slick from the water, and her feet slid out from under her. Hans grabbed her arm and steadied her. Ha! Guess you'll be doing a lot of that for the rest of your life. I'm going to live to save you, Hans said, smiling. The right words just seemed to spill from his mouth. Anna grinned. Gripping his arm tightly, she continued to make her plans. Anyway, so we need to get my dress and figure out what kind of food we'll have. I'm particularly fond of cheese, so we must have a cheese plate. And fondue, obviously. She winked at Hans. As Anna continued to rattle off a list of things they had to do, Hans only half listened. If only father could see me now, he thought, he would have to be proud of me. All his other sons relied on him to make their matches, but not me. I did this all on my own. I can't wait to rub it in his face, and the faces of all my brothers, which reminded him, we will need to have my brothers at the wedding, Hans said, cutting Anna off mid-sentence, as my groomsmen. Yes, absolutely, Anna said eagerly. What would a wedding be without family? How soon will they be able to get here? I can't wait to introduce them to Elsa. Suddenly, Anna's eyes grew wide. Elsa! We have to get back to the castle and tell her our news right away. She's going to be so happy for us. I just know it. She'll probably want to help with all the planning. She has beautiful penmanship. She could totally help with the invitations. And then... Hans put a hand on Anna's arm. My dearest, he said gently. Perhaps we should go tell her the news before we start assigning her work, don't you think? Yes, you're probably right, Anna replied. I'm just so excited. I am too, Anna. I am too. Now let's go find your sister. As they walked back toward the castle, Hans began drafting a conversation with Elsa in his mind. If he thought asking Anna to marry him had been nerve-wracking, the idea of asking Elsa for her approval was downright terrifying. He was going to have to pull out all the stops to try to impress her, starting with making sure he looked head over heels in love with her younger sister. He just needed to get her to like him long enough to let him marry Anna. And if she didn't like him after, if he couldn't find an easy way to overthrow her, well, he had always been a good improviser. Perhaps he would just have to change up his plan a little. Maybe get rid of Elsa altogether. It wouldn't be that hard. Crazy things happen around castles. One never knew when an accident might happen. He stopped himself. He would deal with that if the need arose. For now, he just needed to make sure he was as charming a prince as possible. Hans didn't have long to prepare for his introduction to the queen. Anna sprinted back to the castle so fast he was barely able to keep up. Entering the ballroom, Hans was surprised to see that people were still dancing. Time had seemed to fly by when he was with Anna. He had just assumed it was late and the ball was over. Yet, the dance floor was still packed. The band was still playing, and the food and drink were still coming out of the kitchen. He and Anna pushed their way through the crowd. "Oops," Anna said as she elbowed a young man. "Pardon," she called as she passed by a waiter so fast that the tray the man was holding almost went flying. "Sorry," she shouted as her foot caught the train of a woman's dress, ripping it. By the time they made their way to Elsa, Hans felt like he had been through a battle. But beside him, Anna stood panting as she looked at her older sister. Compared to Anna, Elsa was calm and composed. It seemed as if she hadn't moved since the ball had begun. Her dress was smooth and unwrinkled, and every hair in her head was still in place. Looking over at Anna, Hans smiled. She, on the other hand, was a bit of a mess. Her hair was disheveled, and there were water stains on the bottom of her dress, but it was hard to even notice. All anyone could probably see was a happy smile plastered on her face. "Let's hope Elsa sees how happy she is too," Hans thought as Elsa took in her sister. Then she looked at Hans and raised an eyebrow. Hans gulped. Quickly, Anna dropped it into an awkward curtsy. "Elsa, I mean Queen," Anna corrected herself. May I present Prince Hans of the Southern Isles?" Hans bowed deeply. Then he stood up straight and smiled his most charming smile. "Your Majesty," he said. If he had thought Elsa would return his smile, he was wrong. She merely nodded and gave him the slightest of bows. Okay, so a charm might not be the best tactic with Elsa. Hans remembered the advice his father had given him after a particularly unsuccessful attempt to collect some back taxes. If you wanted to get someone to like you, you just had to act like a mirror. People love their own reflection. He decided to mimic the camaraderie he had witnessed between the two sisters as best he could. Anna, however, seemed blissfully unaware of Elsa's lack of interest and was nearly jumping out of her skin in her excitement to share the big news. "We would like," she began. "Your blessing," Hans added, trying to look as hopeful and innocent as possible. "Of?" Anna said. Then she looked over at Hans and smiled. "Our marriage," they finished in unison. Hans reached over and took Anna's hand. That's what couples announcing their intent to marry did, right? Elsa was totally going to soften. She was going to open her mouth and say, "I'm sorry, I'm confused." That was not what Hans had expected to hear. Maybe an excuse me, or even an oh. But what was she confused about? They wanted to get married. It didn't seem complicated to him. However, while Hans immediately sensed that this was not taking the turn he had hoped, but rather the turn he had feared, Anna seemed to think her sister just needed clarification about the engagement. "Well, we haven't worked out all the details ourselves. We need a few days to plan the ceremony. Of course, we'll have soup, roast, and ice cream, and then..." She looked over at Hans. "Wait, will we live here?" "Here?" Elsa repeated. "Absolutely," Hans said at the same time, his tone a little too eager for his liking. Of course they would live in Arendelle. Returning to the Southern Isles wasn't an option. He was done with that place. Finished for good. The only time he would ever even think about returning was when he had managed to pull this all off and he could sail there with his own fleet, trumpets blaring and a crown on his head. Ignoring the look on Elsa's face, Anna kept going with her plan. "We can invite all 12 of your brothers to stay with us." "Wait," Elsa said, cutting off her sister. "Slow down. No one's brothers are staying here. No one is getting married." As she said this, she glared right at Hans. He could practically hear what she was thinking. Her look said it all. She wasn't fooled by him. All of the smiling and loving glances at Anna hadn't done a thing to win Elsa over. To her, Hans was a stranger, someone he had just swooped in and messed with her sister's heart, which was technically true. With that one look, he knew Elsa was asking the question Anna should have been asking all along. "What are you after?" Looking down at Anna standing beside him, he saw that the smile had faded from her face. It had been replaced by an expression of confusion, as if she couldn't quite process what her sister had just said. "Wait, what?" she asked Elsa, her voice shaking. "May I talk to you, please?" Elsa answered, "Alone." Anna shook her head stubbornly. Then she linked her arm with Hans's. No, she said, the quiver in her voice gone. Whatever you have to say, you can say to both of us. Hans tried not to groan. Why did Anna have to go and say that? Pitting the two of them against Elsa would only make the queen angrier, and more intent on separating the pair. Please don't say what I think you're going to say, he pleaded silently, looking at the queen's stern expression. Please don't ruin everything I've worked for. Not now. Just do not say... Fine, Elsa said. You can't marry a man you just met. Please just do not say that. Hans let out a sigh. Well, that went just swimmingly, he thought. If swimmingly meant drowning in an ocean full of sharks while wearing stone shoes...